little hiccups there to Arnaud. Arnaud is the author of this wonderful book, Why Our Minds Wander, the total title also of our session. And I became aware of this book and Arnaud from a conference that I went to at Harvard. That was a really fascinating gathering about activism, what we do at Third Act, but also consciousness, mindfulness. And so it's this really interesting intersection of science with folks who are out there kind of doing things that we do. What caught my attention about Arnaud's book was the intersection that he brings to the science, which he's going to be talking about, of meditation and mindfulness, but also that he is a very seasoned meditator. This has been something he's been doing for a long time. So he brings these two perspectives of deep science. So Arnaud is a research scientist at the University of California, San Diego. He's a research director at the French National Center for Scientific Research. And he's also a research scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. So he brings all that to this book. But he also brings in his own experience as a meditator. And the book is filled with lots of very interesting exercises that we can all be doing. And then he kind of explains where those exercises come from and in most cases how it connects not just to maybe Eastern and Western meditation ideas, but even more so to some ideas in psychology. So his expertise revolves around meditation, mind wandering, and the application of sophisticated brainwave processing techniques to the study of all these things. And with that, I think I will tell you a little bit about the flow. So Arnaud's going to talk for about a half an hour or so about his work. And then we'll have a little Q&A. So as this is happening, if you have questions, pop them in the chat, and I'll be keeping an eye on that, and I'll pull some of those questions to ask Arnaud. So after he finishes, we'll have a conversation for 10 or 15 minutes. And then, as we've done in other sessions, we'll have an exercise for all of you to participate in. And then when we come back, we'll have more conversation with Arnaud. And that second phase is going to be a lot more about the actual exercises and the actual practice of meditation as opposed to the science, and get Arnaud's thoughts about that. So with that, I will turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to show you some slides because that's what we do. Scientists like to show slides. So let me share my screen. Oops. Okay, that should work, this one. So now you should be able to see my screen. Yes?
We're good.
Yeah. Okay, so why does our mind wander? So that's the, or, why not? So I wrote this book. I'm going to explain you the process. The forward, when I started to do this research about 20 years ago, there was only one person in the world that was studying that topic. It was Jonathan Schooler, who was a distinguished professor at University of California, Santa Barbara. He agreed to write the forward for the book. So I was very honored by that. So where does it all start? So I remember I'm originally from France, came to the US 20 years ago, but I remember being in middle school in the suburbs of Paris. And I think I was like in 6th grade. And then the thought struck me, why am I here? And it stayed. And in my upbringing, Western upbringing, that meant, well, if you want to know why you're here, you need to study the brain. So that's what I did. So I became a brain scientist, but quickly realized that, science can only tell you how things work. It cannot tell you why. So that's why I turned to the practice meditation. And this presentation is also going to be about what is consciousness, which is the topic of my research. So William James, which you probably have heard of, is a famous psychologist from Harvard at the beginning of the 20th century. And he said, consciousness is in constant change. Now we are seeing, now hearing, now reasoning, now willing, now recollecting, now expecting, now loving, now hating. And in 100 other ways, we know our mind to be alternatively engaged. And I like to put this and contrast this with some of the Buddhist scripture. For example, this monk here says, there is no self that stands at the mentality to which characteristics and event accrue and from which they fall away, living intact at death. The stream of consciousness flowing through many lives is as changing as the stream of water. And you might see where I'm going here. This is like the base for mind wandering. Mind wandering is changing, the thoughts changing as the stream of water. So when we meditate, so this is someone meditating, and you can see all these thoughts popping up in their mind. And by the way, one of my interests in mind wandering is that when I started meditation, I was, and I'm still am, mind wandering most of the time. And there was no study of that topic in neuroscience. So that's why I decided to study that topic in neuroscience. But here, the person meditating, you can see his thoughts. Did I remember to loosen my belt? I didn't. Oh, well, too late now. It seems like it's getting tighter somehow, etc. Just ignore it. And then at the very end, oh, wait a minute, I'm not wearing a belt. So it's just his mind spinning, if you will. And so this is mind wandering. So this mind wandering, there's different perspective of whether mind wandering is good or mind wandering is not a good thing. On one hand, some people think mind wandering is a good thing. First, the brain is resting to some extent, and I'll show you some of the experiments we've done. Second, it's fostering creative thoughts in the sense that if you ask someone to do nothing, they become more creative after that period where they did nothing. And again, we have tasks in experimental psychology where we can assess that. The other advantage of mind wandering is that you don't get completely engrossed in the content. For example, if you're watching a movie and you're completely taken by the movie, if you were not mind wandering, you might not think of feeding yourself. So if the movie lasts forever, it's just an extreme example, you might just die of hunger because you're not thinking of feeding yourself. So mind wandering and the thoughts, oh, I'm hungry, for example, that comes up seemingly out of nowhere while you're watching a movie is a good thing for that reason. So this is one of the experiments we did to study mind wandering. And here we have somebody that comes to the lab and we tell them, count your breath from 1 to 10. And whenever you lose the number, just press a button. So you see here, they're counting their in-breath, out-breath. 1, 2, etc. And when they, at some point, they're going to lose the count. And their instruction is, if you realize you don't know what's the next number, or if you have to think very hard, what is the next number, just press the button that we gave you. And we define in the lab, mind wandering, we call it mind wandering episode, as the time before you press the button compared to the time after. After you press the button, you're going to reconcentrate and count the numbers again. So, so here we analyzed the data using brainwaves. So I also, my academic job and our daily academic job is also to process brainwave data. So we have this software that I created 20 years ago, and that's still today the most used software in academia to process brainwave data. So we use this software to try to figure out where in the brain, what happens in the brain when people are mind wandering. And this is just the picture of how we analyze the data very roughly. So this is here, the person we're testing. This is their brain waves. So you see one trace for each electrode here on the scalp. And this is how we visualize the brain waves. So basically when it's red, so this is the nose, the ears. When it's red, it means we have high amplitude brainwave. And when it's blue, we have low amplitude brainwaves. And we can also project that onto the head of the person and even see what's happening within their brain. In this task, the other thing we did, I don't know if you'll have the sound here, but there was a sound in the background. So we asked people to press buttons, and then in the background, we had some sounds, which I'm going to play right now. And the people were asked to ignore the sounds. So, oh, can you hear the sounds? I'll make the sounds because we can't hear them very well. Anyway, there's a beep and a boop. And there's lots of beeps every second. So it's beep, beep, beep. And then once in a while, there's a boop. And basically, the boop is like a surprise signal. So the brain responds in a very specific way to the boops. And what we were interested in is the response to the boops different when they're in this period, when they're mind wandering, they're thinking about something else, compared to the period where they're concentrated? And the answer is yes. The response of the brain, you see here, the response of the brain in blue is lower for mind wandering. So the brain is less excitable, if you want, when you're mind wandering. And together with other results in literature, what we concluded is that mind wandering is a form of micro sleep. The brain becomes much less reactive. And then there is, so this was, mind wandering being a good thing. It's like a form of rest. It allows you to disengage. It allows you to be creative. But there's this other camp, if you want, that mind wandering is not that good. And that's, you might be familiar with that, the monkey mind. So the monkey mind is mind wandering. So the monkey mind is a concept in Eastern philosophy, meditation concept, where you have the mind is like a monkey jumping from branch to branch, jumping from thoughts to thoughts. Got to do laundry, got to car wash, got to make dinner, etc. And it is distracting from from concentration and from our meditation practice. And there was this very influential paper that was published in one of the most prestigious journals more than 10 years ago that says the wandering mind is not a happy mind. And what they did, I did the experiment myself, is on your smartphone, you receive text message about 3 times a day that we're asking you, okay, what are you doing right now? And then we're also asking you, were you concentrated on what you were doing, or were you thinking about something else? In other words, were you mind wandering? And also they were asking, are you happy right now? And what they found is that they found a very strong association between people not being happy and mind wandering, or people being happy and not mind wandering. And what's interesting is that this was even associated with positive mind wandering. Positive mind wandering is like when you think about your vacation. Same thing. So if you're washing the dishes, you're happier washing the dishes and feeling the sensation of the water on your hands, enjoying washing the dishes, but thinking about the grocery shopping. If you're biking, you're more happy if you're enjoying the biking experience than thinking about what you're going to do. And this is common to a lot of experience. In this paper, they even tested, they had people answer during sexual experience. We found that mind wandering is worse when they were having intercourse. So how to tame our thoughts? Let me move my computer here. So to tame our thoughts, we have meditation practices. So meditation practices. So I did this series of recording in India. This is the Meditation Research Institute. And what this institute in India did is that they bought this expensive system. An EEG system is about 30K. So they bought this system and they didn't know what to do with it. So they invited researchers like myself. I was the director of the Meditation Research Institute at some point, to do experiments at the foot of the Himalayas. And we were very lucky because there's a lot of meditators there. And not meditators like us in the West. There's like hardcore meditators. Some of them meditate 8 hours a day. So we had very experienced people. And this is one of the experiments we did with meditators to assess if their mind wandering decreased due to meditation. So we asked them, just meditate. We had 24 people, 12 were expert meditators and 12 were more novice. And every minute or so, we interrupted them, asking them questions. So it's not like a person goes in the room and asks them a question, it's just the computer. There's a sound coming out of the computer that asks them, please rate the depth of your meditation. And then they have a keypad on their knee where they can answer. They don't have to open their eyes, they can just feel. Please rate the depth of your mind wandering, and please rate how tired you are, because we wanted to test if mind wandering was associated with being more tired. And so what we looked at is we looked at the brainwave data preceding basically the answer. But first we analyzed the button press. And what we found is that for experienced meditators, they were spending much more time meditating compared to mind wandering. By contrast, novice meditators were spending more time mind wandering versus meditating. And this is, to my knowledge, the first experiment that shows that meditation decreases mind wandering. And you might think, well, it's obvious. Yeah, you want to tame the monkey mind. That's why you're doing meditation. But until you do experiments with people and, you apply the statistics and the method of, Western science, you can't know for sure. So this experiment shows that more experienced meditators had less mind wandering than novices. And, it's been replicated. I could also go into the caveat of this experiment. And then the other the other method we use to decrease mind wandering, it's called neurofeedback. So we had, and here the idea of neurofeedback is, so neurofeedback is, you look at this computer screen and you do this computer game, but the game is controlled by your brainwave. So there's this kind of entrainment between the game and your brain, and this kind of feedback mechanism, basically. And here the goal was to couple that with meditation. So I'll show you how we did that. And the idea here is not to have just regular neurofeedback, where you just play a game and there's this feedback loop, is that people would do their practice, their meditation practice, and then it would be enhanced by the neurofeedback. So this is our setup. Here, I believe I have a video of my student doing the task, but basically they were asked to perform a meditation, and then the color of the square here depended their frontal, what we call frontal midline theta rhythm. So it's just a brainwave that's over the frontal cortex, and that's in the theta frequency band. And basically, the higher their theta, the brighter the square. So they were instructed, try to make the square brighter while doing your practice. So here is the person. So it's just look at the square. They do their meditation practice, but they also try to make the color go lighter. And the frontal midline theta rhythm we picked this rhythm because we observed it in meditators. So we thought we could enhance their meditation in that way. So this is what we observed. There was 192. There were only 24 people, but there was 192 sessions because they came every day for 8 days. And you see the people here who got neurofeedback and the people who got what's called sham. So sham is people come to the lab, they believe they get neurofeedback, but they don't. The color changes, but it's not based on their brainwave. It's based on some random fluctuation. We asked them after, do you think you control the color? And they all like, oh yeah, I control the color. So we don't tell them you're not controlling the color. And the reason we do that is a lot of things happens in people's mind when they come to the lab. You know, they might just do better just because they came to the lab. They think they're getting some treatment. So this is why we use this sham and use this double blind method where they don't know if they're getting the real neurofeedback or the sham neurofeedback. What this curve shows is after several days, the subject that get the real neurofeedback do see some increase in their frontal midline brainwaves, and the people who didn't get the real neurofeedback show no change. Then we also tested, of course, on the task I've showed you, for example, pressing the button. Do they answer, for example, I get less mind wandering. So we had a battery of tasks, and we found one of them we found some results. This is a memory task, so we found that this does improve their memory. We didn't find a strong effect in the mind wandering task. So this is to show you the kind of experiments we can do to try to understand better mind wandering and how to study it. But where do thoughts come from? So now I arrive at the part of my presentation which is more provocative, and some of the research I'm also interested in that's more fringe. And I like to play this presentation by Mathieu Ricard. You might have heard of Mathieu Ricard. He's published several books. Here he was talking about at the International Symposium on Contemplative Science. Mathieu Ricard is also the translator for the Dalai Lama. And here on this side were prestigious neuroscientists and philosopher. So it was a very large conference with 600 people. And this is what he said. He's telling a story. So I'm going to play the story. It's like 2-3 minutes. And if there's a problem with the sound, let me know, because I don't think I shared with the sound. But that should be okay.
I want to just give one example, because when I was discussing with my philosopher father, he was a completely unbeliever, agnostic, anything you want. And he was, one of the first things he took me on was about this really stupid stuff about all what I've been talking about. And so I told him, look, I'll tell you a story, and then you make whatever you want out of it. But what I promise you is I'm not telling you lies. So one day I was in my hermitage in Darjeeling, living with my teacher, and I used to come to see him every night for many years to have teachings and so forth. And then one day I remember when I was a teenager, my uncle was in the seaside, and there's a lot of those rats that immigrated from America on ships that were destroying his pond. And he was a hunter, and he told me, why don't you go with a rifle and see if you find some rats. So I basically never hunted and didn't fish much, but somehow for some strange reason, I took that rifle and went there. I was 16 years old. So then one of the rat came and I shot, and the rat jumped. And I hope still now that I didn't really kill him. It was just a surprise, but I don't know. In any case, when I was doing retreat, when I was 20 plus, and then one day that things came very clear in my mind. And I said, how could I ever conceive of doing something like that? Now, speak of lack of empathy. Not even imagine what it would be to be just a nice rat swimming there and someone just trying to kill. So unbelievable. So I could not believe that I had done something like that. And I said, well, I'm going to tell my teacher, sort of kind of confession. So at 5 o'clock, I went down from my hermitage, went to see my teacher. That time I didn't speak Tibetan, but his son was interpreting. And as usual, I sort of bowed down 3 times. And I looked at him and he was laughing at me, just heartily laughing. And telling something to his son. And when I came by, he said, how many animals did you kill in your life? He never ever asked me about my past, my youth, my stories. He knew I was coming, being an ex-scientist who decided to sort of live and receive teaching from him. He never asked me a question about my childhood of any kind. And at that very moment, he asked me that. And it looks very simple. It was not like suddenly there was some vibes and strange lights in the room. It was just like a nice joke. But just give me an explanation. I don't have one.
So this is where do thoughts come from? In this case, is it telepathy? Is telepathy possible? So this is the type of question I was personally interested. And this is the question. This is what we call big C consciousness. So I have less than 10 minutes, but let me explain you briefly what I mean by that, and then show you some of the experiments I've done. So you have little C consciousness and big C consciousness. Little C consciousness is the consciousness that does the computation, interpreting images, helping you do some math. This is what we call little C consciousness, because we cannot understand how it works already. The big C consciousness is the sense of being that we experience. So here, this is a branch tree where we go down different possibility, and this is, specific belief systems. So you equal your brain. If you answer yes to that question, you equal your brain, then you're what we call a physicalist or materialist reductionist. You do not believe consciousness exists. You do not believe the sense of being exists. It just doesn't exist, which is strange because, we kind of know it exists, but, that's their claim. Or you say, no, you are not your brain. And so then there's, again, the hypothesis is that is consciousness a epiphenomenon? So, for example, here you have the brain, you have some neural activities, and then out of that emerge consciousness. And it's called an epiphenomenon, meaning that can it have causal influence back onto the neurons or not? And most scientists, I would say, are in that camp. They said, yes, consciousness exists, but consciousness is a epiphenomenon, which means you have an absence of free will. Even though, this is, again, there's a lot of caveat here. There's people who believe consciousness is a phenomenon, but there's still free will. But, just to simplify, if you believe consciousness is a phenomenon, it cannot have an influence back on the neuron, then you have absence of free will. Or no, you believe consciousness is more of an epiphenomenon, and in that case, you can have causal action. back, from consciousness, whatever it is, back to the brain. And if you can have causal action, you again have two possibilities. Either the action is only local, meaning yes, consciousness can have causal action, but only within the brain, not going out of the brain. It's like some kind of quantum phenomena or something, but only local. Or it can have action at a distance, non-local influence. So that's the type, that could explain my Ricard experience. And this one, this is the hypothesis I was interested in testing. And it might sound really weird, but for those of you who know a little bit about physics, you have lots of weird stuff in the world, like quantum mechanics, where it says non-locality is everywhere. You can have atoms entangled, in different parts of the universe and communicating instantaneously, faster than the speed of light. And you have all these weird things if you dig up. So, this hypothesis might not be completely outrageous. Show me the data. So I don't think, do I have 5 more minutes? Or I can end it in 1.
No, keep going.
Okay. So first, I like to present these results because they show us that we're not independent of our environments, and this is results which have been demonstrated. So in 2021, some researchers showed that women menstrual cycles were synchronized to some extent to moon phases. So our body, especially women, is synchronized to some extent to planetary changes. And then you have these other experiments where researchers simulated magnetic fields. When new pigeons could find the North Pole just based on the Earth magnetic fields they have in their brain, they have magnetoreceptor, so they can orient themselves in the Earth magnetic field. But this experiment shows that humans have that capacity as well, not just to orient themselves, but to sense the magnetic field. And again, that's been published in reputable journals and reproduced. And this other result right here that shows sunspots and solar wind also influence our physiology. This is not brain. This is what we call heart rate variability, which means changes in heart rhythm. But again, this is not questioned by scientists anymore. And the idea is that you can imagine that sunspots and solar wind could influence the Earth magnetic field, actually in a big way, and that the Earth magnetic field could influence our physiology. So maybe this is the mechanism. We don't know yet the mechanism. We just know that here, about 30 minutes after sunspots, you do have, when you take enough people, some variation in people's physiology. And at the very coarse level, this could be support for telepathy. Lots of sunspots and everybody becomes upset at the same time. So then what about more direct experience? So we had this survey of 1,200 meditators, and we asked them about the specific experience they might have had during meditation. And here, for example, you see non-physical entities in your awareness, vision, or hearing, clairvoyance or telepathy, connection with your teacher or guru. And you see here more than 50% claim to have at least more than once clairvoyance or telepathy. It doesn't make it real. Just they could be deluded. They could just think they had clairvoyance or telepathy, but it just means that this is an experience that is not rare in meditators. And to study this question, I was especially interested in mediumship. So mediumship is when you go see a professional to tell you about your deceased relatives. And here I'm not making any hypothesis, but spirits exist. or things like that, the hypothesis is very simple: do they have access to some information that they're not supposed to access? Also, in these readings, the professional tries to get some evidential information to the person in front of them. So they try to convince them that they're in contact with their deceased relatives. So that's the first part. So that's relatively easy to test in laboratory because they give a lot of evidence. So we can try to check if these evidence are correct or not. And the other reason I was interested in this topic is that there were 2 reputable studies published before. So this is how it works. This is one of my PhD students, Cedric. We had professional mediums and professional controls, and we did several experiments. This is just one of them. And then we showed them 200 pictures in 3 different categories. So these were a picture of people who had passed, and people could have passed of a heart attack, car accident, and death by firearm. And we asked them for each picture, how did you think this person passed? And here we can try to do this experiments as a subject. We're doing it, of course, with this is, respecting these people who passed. We were public figures, so we can use their image. And so one of them passed of a heart attack, another one of a car accident, and another one of a firearm. This is the first person. And usually you have 3 buttons to answer. So is it by firearm, heart attack, or car accident? Second person. And third person. And now these are the answers. So the first person died of a heart attack, second person auto crash, and third person homicide. And so we asked them to all of our mediums and our control. And this is what we obtain. So they have 1 chance out of 3 to be correct. And here you can, so if everybody was at the line here, they would just be at chance expectation. That's how we say it. And you can see that there is more bar above, basically, than below. And here we said the odds against chance are 1 in 41, which means that we have a significant difference. So people are able to tell above chance, the mediums and non-mediums here. We didn't find, strong difference between the groups. Above chance whether how these people have passed. And it's not like they're 100%, they're barely above chance expectation, but there is something. And again, it doesn't necessarily demonstrate telepathy or some necessarily some paranormal activity. It could be some fact that in some pictures some people look more sick, etc. So I can come back to the regular interpretation. This does not necessarily imply that they're using paranormal skills to do that, but at least it just warrants more studies and better control to study these topics. We also found some difference in their brainwaves and published the results in brain and cognition. We've published many other papers on the subject. We always publish in what we call peer-reviewed journals, Frontier in Psychology, for example, which are journals which are read by other scientists. And these papers, because there's so little scientists studying this question, mostly because if you study these questions, you might ruin your career. They are widely read. So they're usually in the top 1% of the most article read, just because scientists like to study, like to look at these, even though they feel shy of studying these questions. My last slide, I feel, first, these, I don't feel this is necessarily demonstrated, that people can have access to that kind of information. We need to do more studies, but this could be an indication. But not all thoughts come from within the brain. and that there might be some truth to some of the ancestral, Hindu teaching of the global consciousness field, etc. And that also this might be the tip of the iceberg, in the sense that I like to show this vase. So this is an electric eel, and this is a vase from 2,500 years ago, from ancient Greece. So ancient Greek knew about electricity, but it was just a curiosity for them. They didn't use it in their daily life, and now we can see how electricity, is widely used. So maybe it's kind of the same. We can live, without knowing that telepathy is real, but maybe once we do, we can harness it for some good in the world. So this is here. Dan took my citation, so I won't read it again to you. But his thoughts are just like birds flying across the sky. That's the one he gave us at the beginning. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Arnaud. Folks, if you have questions you'd like to ask, put them in the chat. We have a few minutes for questions. One of the things that struck me kind of at a high level, Arnaud, is I've been reading this book. I don't know if you know the Scottish writer Ian McGilchrist, and he talks a lot about the brain, left hemisphere, right hemisphere, and he's written this amazing book about the brain, and it goes into all sorts of things. But part of what one of his big things is that he talks about the last century is the century of physics, and perhaps this century is the century of biology. And some of the things that you were talking about there, seemed to me, maybe on the beginning edges of learning, all sorts of things are going to be very surprising with respect to biology, both human biology and all biology, particularly human biology. So I was just wondering what you had any reactions to that idea.
I agree. I do think there is still going to be a century. Maybe the next century will be the century of biology, because there's still lots of things we don't understand in physics. General relativity and quantum mechanics are still, very much unreconcilable. And so I still think there will be answer in this century in, physics. But in terms of consciousness, how can we link consciousness with physics? I hope there'll also be some development in that realm. And there has been over the past 15 years. 15 years ago, there was no theories of consciousness that went beyond, consciousness is just an emergent property of matter, period. And now there are theories, some of them testable.
I was going to ask you, well, there's a lot of different questions. And one of the points that McGilchrist makes is that some of the Einstein being the great example, but Niels Bohr and others, to them, they're like, some of this many people would see as a conflict between science and spirituality. And we're, in that some of your work is kind of in that realm between and things, and that many people would see these as things in conflict, but actually people like Bohr and Einstein and others saw it the exact opposite. There's no conflict between science and spirituality / religion in their minds, and that they have some really fascinating writing about what is the ultimate reality and things like that. And just the the difficulty that we have in understanding the miracle of life, and like the things you're talking about, is perhaps indication right there there's something else going on. I wanted to ask you a specific question, which was when you were talking about the neural feedback, do you think that is a mechanism that maybe could help people become better meditators, or would you even want to go that route?
Yeah, especially in our Western world, we like machines and gadgets, and we prefer that to just sitting on the cushion and just meditating for hours. So I do think it can help people in the Western world. Yeah, meditation assisted app on smartphones. Like, we work with this company that's, they have them use. So we do experiments with them too. Yeah, I do think so.
And in your realm, and you're just like moving a little bit, starting a little bit into your personal experience. In that regard, have you found in your lifetime that you've gone through periods, longer periods, not a day or two, where the nature, not the nature, the ability of yourself to meditate in a way where you're feeling benefits to it is really working well or not working well? Like you're being blocked, or the periods where you're blocked and you just can't, it's just not working, versus periods where something unlocks. And has that happened? And is there anything you learned from that might be advice to us who are newer to this?
First, I'm a scientist. I'm not a meditation teacher. So I mean, whatever I can tell you is as good as any of you could have experienced in your practice. In my practice, yeah, I did feel, I was stuck at some points. In my book, I go through some of the practice which have helped me. The work by Byron Katie, the Sedona method, which are, meditation oriented practices where you just question your thoughts. And, especially when you're in distress, these methods really help to give you perspective.
Arnaud, so one question I had for you. So you've got this lovely book. And by the way, folks, this is a really readable book, Why Our Minds Wander. The thing that I really like about it is that the science it's definitely written for the lay audience. So the science is described in a way that's very approachable. And then also, especially in the second half of the book, but even in the beginning, Arnaud does this wonderful job of mixing in very specific practices to try and relates some of that back to his previous experience. So now my question for you is, why did you write the book? Or maybe more, what do you hope that we, your audience, get from the book after reading it?
So why did I write the book? And this reminds me of maybe you've heard of Thich Nhat Hanh, is a Vietnamese monk, very famous and an activist in the 60s, 70s. He passed a couple of years ago, but I used to attend some of his retreats, and he said, look for in that context, I mean, it's like, I'm not making any political statement, but he said, look for George Bush within you, because there was 20 years ago, there was always polemic about George Bush, and, but he was saying, instead of just trying to say there's this, that in the world, look within you, what's wrong with you, and try to change it. So that's why, I wrote the book, because it was like a process of looking within myself rather than, blaming the world for everything that happens, and, look for what was wrong within myself and trying to change and sharing that with others. And I think I write at the end of the book, if it just helps one person. I know we all have these books, transformative books, we've read. Like there was one book at one moment we were ready, and it changed us. And we would have read that book 2 years later, would have no effect. But we have these couple of books which are very influential. So that's what I hope for this book. Just it's like, if it does one or a couple of people read it, and it changes their life, because it just gives them a different perspective, and they were ready. And it was one of the first book they read on that subject. So it's not like the book is special in that way, but I think that's the one of the reasons I wrote that book. Self-discovery, but what was wrong with me, and there's still many wrong things, and also helping others.
Well, it fits in perfectly with the series because, as you know, part of the whole point of this series is we all of us struggle in different ways and different things, but third actors in particular struggle with the issues that we're trying to work on, and we're all older people, so we've got a lot going on that we're struggling with, and so in my personal experience, these kind of books and what you've written is hugely helpful just to, to find hope and joy in the work that we do against all the challenges. So that's a wonderful part of it for me. Couple questions. So one was,
I can add something also, like your mission about climate change. So, that was like the message of Thich Nhat Hanh, change yourself first to change the world, basically. And, if we all start realizing, oh, we're not independent of our environment, when we destroy the earth, we're destroying ourselves to some extent, and if people realize that at the very deep in their core, they'll just stop doing it. They don't have to be activists or anything. They're just, that's not productive, what I'm doing. So it's going to be natural change.
yeah. I'm there's a book that came out a couple years ago that some folks wrote for him. Not the name is escaping me, but it's Thich Nhat Hanh talking about the intersections of meditation, spirituality, and folks working on climate change. It's a great book. Couple questions. So one is, how do you feel about the connection between our gut and our brain, which is being studied in depth? The effect of bacteria's byproducts on depression, autism, etc.
I think it's fantastic to, just realize that there is more to ourselves than our brain. Like our brain is not an organ functioning independently. We are influenced. We call the stomach the second brain. There's actually tons of connection between, there's oscillations. There's stomach wave, not brain wave, stomach wave, which are interacting with the brain waves. And then same in the heart. There's connection between the brain and the heart. And for example, they have patients which suffer from what's called pure autonomic failure, in which there is one of the nerve that connects the brain to the heart that is severed. It's not severed, but it's atrophied. And these people can't feel emotion strongly. They can know, and so it just means like the heart helps us feel the emotion strongly. And there's lots of models of why this is the case. Famous neuroscientists say, first, you have, like, for example, you see a lion, and first your heart start beating, and then your brain interpret, oh, I'm scared. So it's not like you see the lion, you're scared. It's you see the lions, your body physiology change, and then you become scared. And so the fact, I love it. We are doing some experiments with recording both stomach and brain at the same time.
A very different angle of her question. I'm curious who's funding your work. What entities care about this enough to pay for it?
So that's a great question. And there's the work at UCSD. Work at UCSD is really funded by federal agencies. So NIH, National Institute of Health, NSF, National Science Foundation. So big foundations, and these are multi-million dollar grants, which are not easy to get. So our job still depends on being able to get enough of these. And then there's the work on more the fringe, about telepathy, etc. And this is founded by, so this is part of my work with IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And this is founded by, people like you and private donors mostly, because Yeah, it's not funded by the federal government, so it's just funded by private individuals who are interested in these questions.
Some other things coming through the chat. Fortunately, a few people have better memories than I. That book that I was mentioning is Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet. It's right up our alley for those third actors who are working on climate change. It's right up there, and really does take what Arnaud has been talking about today and turn it into lots of specificity with respect to folks working on the environment and thinking about the environment. So last question. So you've been on the meditation side, you've been doing this a long time. And I wondered if you thought back to the time when you started and the person you are now, what's different? What's been the impact of meditation on your life?
Many. I mean, especially at the beginning, there was this realization that I'm not my thoughts. So, thoughts come and go. And you can kind of feel that when you're reading a book, you start thinking about something else, but you don't have a deep understanding of it. So when you're meditating, and remind me of an anecdote when I was in India with this a guru. So a friend of mine brought me to his guru, and we were doing chanting, Hindu chanting, etc. And at the end, the guru asked me, "What did you think? This is so different to whatever you're doing. How did you think?" And I told him, well, it didn't sound so different from my practice. Sometimes I was in the singing, sometimes I was thinking about something else, about myself, what I'm going to do afterwards, etc. I don't know if he agreed or not. He smiled, but yeah. So that's what it taught me. First and foremost is I'm not my thoughts, even though I still, at times believe my thoughts very strongly. So I'm not gonna die for my thoughts.
Yeah. Well, and that's
it's just a belief system, it's like you can let it go. You don't have to be from this political side or this political side if it means hurting anybody, any political side.
Yeah. That's a good intro into the little reading I'll do at the end. So first of all, Arnaud, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for writing this book. What a cool conversation. I hope someday we meet in a bar or a cafe sometime, because I got a lot of questions for you. As somebody who comes from a science background, I just find all this fascinating. And to the degree to which more and more, like the work that you're doing and others are doing, and then you make these connections back to meditation practices and descriptions of why those are powerful.